So I'm going to be showing you how to do that. And first we'll do a slideshow of most of the paintings I've done since September. And I guess we'll just get that started pretty soon.
1 second, I'm just getting our live stream going.
Yeah,
Okay, we're ready.
That's fine. Yeah.
Ready to show your slideshow.
Okay. Yeah, and I did include a materials list in the Facebook event, and I don't know if anyone's actually going to be doing this along with me. And you could technically do it along with me. I don't think I could ever actually get one done in an hour and a half. It would be probably not up to my usual standards, but a lot of these videos are actually they're sped up quite a bit, so it'll look like my hands are moving extra fast, and they are. That was just how I could fit the whole thing in the hour and a half.
Are you ready, Violet?
Yes. Yeah, so when we get the slideshow up,
Is it not working?
no, I don't see it. Does anyone else see it? Do you see it?
Let me try that one more time, folks.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, I'm clicking on the right thing here, people. There we go. Okay, are you seeing?
Perfect, we see it.
Yes. That's a little close up. Yeah, so that's a full-size painting, and then next I'll show a little close up. There we go. Okay, yeah, so those are all the paintings I've done in order. There's been a couple more since then. I just haven't gotten photographed, including the one that I made while making these videos. So, and that one's finished, and you'll see it at the very end. And yeah, so the way that the next video is painting, and it's painting the first layer. I've got sort of the start of one right here. And the way that I do it is, and we can start at anytime you're ready, Shoshana, is
I'm trying to do one quick thing. I'm so sorry.
okay, yeah, that's no problem. I'll just keep talking. So for me, it's the painting part is very loose and it's abstract, and I'm going for these like organic shapes that are very kind of round and squishy and shaped like eggs and avocados and beans and things like that. And the colors are really important. So to me, because of the way that the colors make me feel, because the colors attach a lot of feeling to me. So the first coat that I'm going to start showing, and this is my supplies and everything in my easel. I just did like with a time lapse with my phone. But I did focus more on the mixing of the colors. So when that gets started, I'll tell you about my process and how I'm doing that. So I'm a big fan of more like tertiary colors, which that means it's like a primary color and a secondary color mixed. For instance, like an orangey yellow is one of my favorite colors to use. And I tend to not go for like the really like, you know, already pre-mixed color. Like I do a lot of mixing to get the colors that I like. And I do add a lot of white. I really like pastels, and just so one thing that I'm doing here is I am mixing two kind of opposite colors. They're pretty contrasting, and I'm mixing them pretty close together. And then while I'm painting, I just sort of end up mixing both of those contrasting colors together, which makes it a bit muddier, gives it sort of more of an earthy kind of tone. And in this particular painting, that was like the palette that I was going for. And sometimes I like to just use like really bright colors and be super colorful and like get the whole rainbow in there. But then other times I like it to be a bit more muted. So I've got this kind of bluish purple pastel color that I'm working on here. And then I've also got this kind of peachy yellow. Okay, so here's me mixing real fast with my time lapse. And then I've got the bluish purplish color, and then I've got that mixed with a little pastel around that kind of egg shape. And then I'm going for it with the orangey yellow pastel. And yeah, so I tend to make the paint really thick on my brush. It feels really good going on, like and that's what this whole thing is about, is just like the pleasure of painting. And it's not like it's a job, or you know what I mean. It's a fun thing to do, and it's really satisfying. So I like my brush to be pretty thick with the paint. And I do a second coat, and I showed more of that. Like with the first coat kind of goes by pretty fast, and here I'm mostly concentrating on mixing the colors and just like adding a whole bunch of white. And I'm pretty casual with the way I do it, and I actually couldn't find my palette knife, so I'm just like using this little paintbrush to grab the colors and mix them together. I like to have like a rag on hand so that I can wipe off the brush so I don't get, too much paint everywhere. But yeah, this is me mixing paint at, I think it's like double time. So that's why my hand's like. Doot, 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 doot. So now I decided that I wanted it to be a little bit pinker. I've got this kind of like hot pink paint that I'm using. That's, but you can make, you know, your own pink just out of the right color of red and white, of course. So what I'm doing is I'm making these round kind of shapes, and just putting the colors on in a way that I find pleasing, like the way that they sort of contrast with each other, kind of set each other off. And I'm mixing the colors together a bit, and I'm getting this kind of like sagey color. It's a little more earthy. And I do like to, okay, so this is where I kind of bump my camera and it gets a little, don't get seasick. This part doesn't last too long, luckily. Anyway, I was saying one thing I like to do with the canvas is paint all over it, including the edges. I mean, I don't necessarily make the edges look as perfect as the front, but I like to be able to see the painting from all sides and not just have it be on the very front and not on the edges. Hi, Mom. Yeah, so this is me painting in time lapse, so it's a little bit fast and jerky. And I basically got these two colors that I just mixed together in different ways, and that's how I'm doing this one. Now I'm turning the my peach color. Now I'm turning the peach color a bit more kind of pink, and this, I think this color ends up getting a little bit muddier than I would have liked, but that's fine because we are going to be doing a second coat. Yeah, and I mean, if you actually want to end up doing a painting like I am, I think it's really just all about your personal taste, like what colors you're drawn to, and it's really open-ended. And as far as the abstract shapes, it's, you know, what your favorite shapes are or what makes you feel good. Like if you love triangles and squares, then, you know, go ahead and make it really geometric. But for me, like I was going for this really natural kind of feeling with these forest paintings. And there's so much chaos in the forest and so much randomness. Like there's just, and just in nature, but especially in the forest, because there's just such a dense amount of plants that it's hard for your eye to even take it all in, like just the scene. So that's kind of what I'm going for with this project, is layering and using kind of randomness to make a pleasing effect in the end. So I think that the cool thing about it is that you don't necessarily have to be a really good painter or, you know, a really good artist, but I think it does rely a lot on just your intuition with colors and shapes. And everybody has just, you know, different tastes about that. And I tend to try to avoid like the really dark colors that like I try to desaturate, and that's why I keep adding white and Doing it with this tiny brush is kind of time consuming, but at least it's sped up a lot. So I'm making it a bit pinker by adding white and this hot pink color. And the idea with the forest paintings is that I never really use colors that are specifically that you would ever find in a real forest. So it's not, there's no realism here. It's just the idea of it. Yeah, I mean, I do like the colors of nature, but this is just a lot more just sort of open, like you can just whatever colors that really grab you or that you think look really good together. Okay, so that's it for the first coat, and I'm just giving a spray down to my little palette, which is just like a yogurt lid, and putting a little piece of aluminum foil on top. And that'll keep the paint moist for the second coat. You know, not forever, but for some amount of time, and then you can come back and spray it down again if you need more time. But the next video is we're going to be drawing and making these abstract shapes and patterns. And so I like to use this really decorative paper that's beautiful, and you know, like handmade paper is really nice, or just like high quality paper, and it doesn't really take that much. You can see like the size of the pieces that I cut out. And then I draw these repeating patterns on the paper. And well, right now I'm using a Sharpie, and I think it's like a teal color. I do like to use like a variety of pens. One of my favorites is to do like an opaque colored pen over a darker color. And you can do that with a paint pen. I've got a few, I think I'm using a purple paint pen during this process. But I'm also using gel pens, which aren't technically like archival quality, you know, not necessarily made to last forever. They're kind of more for kids. But because I'm doing layers of Mod Podge, kind of seals it up at the end. That protects it and keeps it from fading. I guess only time will tell how long the gel pens last. But this is a paint pen, and it's like a lavender color. It's a little bit hard to see. And the paper has these really pretty leaves printed on it. So the actual drawing, the time that it took to draw on all of these was a lot longer than I had time for in this workshop. This next one is a lot more detailed. So this one took a while to make. And the shapes that I cut out that I'm drawing on right now are just kind of random. So they're just about the size that I wanted. But after I'm done with the drawing, then I will cut them into shapes that I want to use in the painting. And this pattern I'm doing is this repeating pattern that I do a lot. I call it scales. They kind of look like fish scales or lizard scales, maybe. And I'm using these gel pens by Jelly Roll. It's a hot pink and this kind of teal blue color. And this is definitely the first time that I've ever done an entire art project on camera, and it's so different than like the pace is so different. You feel a lot more on the spot. So I think it comes out somewhat different than my other paintings, but it's still part of the set, I'd say. So the pen that I was just using, it's this really fancy gel pen. It's called Souffle. And you can't really see it very well. It takes 10 minutes for it to dry, and as it dries, you can kind of see it's turning this really pale pink color. And with the gel pens and the paint pens, you do have to be careful that you don't smear them. So that's why I'm kind of turning the paper around and around as I go, so I don't get my hand in it. Doing these repeating patterns is sort of a calming thing to me. It's something I can do like without having to think very hard, because I draw comics, and they're usually based on like a story, and you have characters, and you have to keep it all in order, and but when I do these patterns, it's just very kind of free form and just a lot more enjoyable. Just, it's kind of something I can do like anytime. I don't have to be like in just the right mood. I like to take these little pieces of paper around with me and work on these drawings outside. One thing that isn't really captured on film, but I noticed that I do a lot, is just looking at what I'm doing and kind of turning it around and picking up pens and then setting them down. And I edited a lot of that out because it's very slow, but that's how the artistic process works. I mean, I think it's actually that way for every kind of art. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, and that doesn't look like anything. Like if you're writing, you probably spend a lot of time just looking off into space, and it looks like you're not doing anything, but your brain is working, thinking about it, but it doesn't look like anything in video. So it's a little hard to see this, but this is this really pretty paper that has these sort of it has a floral design on it, and it's kind of textured. One of my favorite things is to work with paper that already has a pattern on it, and just add patterns on top of that. So it'll be like this kind of clashing one pattern on top of another. And I really like to layer everything. And that's what these paintings are. They're many layers. So starting with the paint and then adding these paper shapes. Yeah, so this is just this form of collage that I'm doing. I think most people, when they think of collage, they think of, like getting out a magazine and cutting things out and pasting it. But I tend to go for to collage with my own art. So I take the paper, which has a pattern, that's printed on it, but then I'll draw all over that. And after I glue it on, sometimes I will draw another layer over after the painting's done, kind of like the final step. And this paper is kind of thick. It's like a cardstock. like an off-white color. And then, so the forest paintings, I think all have the feeling could be also an undersea feeling, because, you know, here on the North Coast, we have these huge kelp forests. So it's almost like we have this mirror going on underneath the ocean of the forest that's happening inland. We've got the giant redwood trees, and then we've got this giant kelp also growing. And I like to think about that, even though I never actually go under there. But so I feel like when I do patterns like this, it's kind of more of a sea feeling, an ocean, underwater, watery feeling. All the bubbles and everything, and the little ocean currents. And that's the fun thing about an abstract piece of art, is that it could be, even though I say it's a forest, it's also the ocean. So now I'm doing this, I'm using this, that pen I was talking about, the souffle pen, which is, it makes this pink. Well, now we're on to the next thing. Okay, so I did skip ahead a bit because this whole process, like I said, takes a long time. And the shape I'm cutting out now is very round. I like to put as many round edges as possible, and it kind of has like a puffy cloud kind of feeling to it. And after I cut out the outer shape, I start to cut these little shapes in the middle, starting from the outside and then going in. And these are little crescent moon shapes. So after I cut out all these little tiny shapes, I put them aside, and I'm going to glue them on too. So the idea is that you'll end up with this mirror image going on, where there's the echoing patterns going on, where you've got the absence of the shape where you cut it out, and then the shape itself in another part of the painting. And I try to balance that in a way that's pleasing. It's funny to me to watch my hands going this fast. It's like they're kind of vibrating. Okay, so now I'm cutting out another kind of round shape. And the little pointy pieces that I'm cutting off, I save all of those too. And I use them, and I'll show you, I think the next video, I'll show you what I use those for. All right, so now I'm cutting out these kind of curvy, I guess, sort of like plant stems is what they're kind of shaped like. And it's really easy to lose these tiny little pieces. I'm like constantly trying to keep track of them. Okay, so this one I did draw on, but it was just really hard to see, so I didn't show that part. It's this really pretty kind of orangey color, and I think I used my teal gel pen to draw all over that. But like I said, you can't see it. But so it's another one of those kind of puffy cloud shapes. And these are like, I guess they're kind of diamonds, curvy diamonds, I guess you could call them, or almost like eyeball shapes. I do a lot of eyeball shapes. I use a couple of different kinds of scissors. I'm using these tiny scissors to cut the tiny shapes. And then I use a bigger pair of scissors to cut the outer part usually. Yeah, you can kind of see the really pale pink pen dots that I added to this. The fun thing about doing these opaque pens is that you can draw over dark colors. And I really like that. That's one of my favorite things. You can draw on dark colored paper too, and it looks really cool. So I'm cutting out these kind of crescent moon shapes again. I think this is the last one. Oh, nope, one more. Yeah, so I think I ended up making a lot of these, maybe too many of these shapes, these kind of cloud shapes, because it's kind of a smaller painting, but that's okay too. I think I just wanted to show all the different ways that different kinds of paper and different kinds of pens can be used. Okay, so those are kind of like the treetops, or just these shapes that trees have that are just a big bunch of leaves in a very abstract way. And I think in the next video, we're going to be painting the second coat. And that might actually be one of my favorite parts. So this is how it looks after I did the first coat. It looks a little funky, like just unfinished. And you can see the brush strokes, right? Especially in the middle. And I decided I didn't really like that, that brownish color, so I started painting over that first. Okay, so I'm using a smaller brush just for those little pointy parts. I'm pretty much just using these two sizes, like one bigger round brush and then a smaller brush. Mostly, I don't have to mix the paint because I have paint saved from the first coat because I sprayed the water on it and put the cover over it. I do repaint. I mean, I guess you could call it repainting. I'm putting a second coat on just to make the colors more vibrant, because even though I use really thick paint, there's always going to be these little white specks showing through, and there's parts where it's uneven and you can really see the brush strokes. And you know, everybody has different tastes about, you know, how they want their paintings to look. I like my shapes to be more, I guess, opaque. Just I want them to really stand out. And I think that's what the second coat is doing, is it's making it stand out more. Sometimes I'll get lucky and I'll put the first coat on and it'll go on just so, and I won't need to do a second coat. But then I'll look at it later and I'll be like, well, I probably should have done second coat because I can see it's not up to my standards, I guess. And like I said, I think everybody has a different idea of what looks good. And sometimes, like, I think you can see here, like the color that I'm putting on right now is like, doesn't quite match, but that's okay. And that can be a bummer when you have like the perfect color for the first coat and then you go put the second coat on and it doesn't quite match. But, you know. And also with with this painting, a lot of it's going to be covered up. And what I end up doing is collaging over parts that I just not as fond of, I guess. And then I'll purposely leave parts exposed that I think look the best. So yeah, there's a lot of room for error and for kind of, I guess, more or less sloppiness when you're collaging over it. Yeah, so I think what was happening here is that I kind of wasn't that into that brown color. So I started painting over it with this lavender color. And yeah, the shapes do change a little bit as you go with the second coat. But that's fine because it's just so it's really a free form way of doing things. Yeah, I think I'm using it's a kind of a square, flat, smaller brush for this part. And you know, I pretty much just use all different kinds of brushes. But when I'm doing more detailed stuff, like I'm kind of doing like a little bit of shading on this shape, then I'll go for a bit of a smaller brush. I really like to use like a fatter round brush for the bigger shapes. It's more relaxing on the hand, and just the whole idea for me behind making these paintings was sort of like a therapeutic way to just de-stress. And when I get sometimes into these really minute detailed things, it can be like the opposite effect. So having these kind of bigger shapes that are just really free form is feels really good. And just working with paint feels really good too, just because of the consistency of it. It's just because it goes on so in this kind of flowing way that's kind of moist. And like I do so much drawing, and with the illustration part, it's a lot more of a dry medium, which can be, I think, just kind of harder on the body. So I think painting is just like more ergonomic, and especially when you have an easel set up and you've got it kind of vertical like that can really help with just the way it feels when you're doing it. Okay, so I'm flipping it around, and I do usually flip it around a bunch of times while I'm painting, just to get a better angle. And plus, since I'm painting around the sides, it can kind of get stuck to the easel, so you just have to pull that off. It looks like I still had some this kind of bluish color on my brush when I grabbed the green, but I think that's okay because that can end up making a pretty cool effect, even if you don't do it on purpose. Okay, that's it. So that was the second coat. And this is how it looks dry. Okay, so after this is the next video, I think we're moving on to making the trees. I don't know, that is, I guess I said that painting the second coat was my favorite part, but I kind of think this is my favorite part. So I've got this tissue paper and I got it at the dollar store. I mean, it's not like exceptional tissue paper or anything. And I've got a bunch of scraps of paper. I use 2 layers of tissue paper. And what I do is I cut up in Mod Podge. There's my Mod Podge. And I've got this flat brush that I use just for the Mod Podge. And I use a lot of Mod Podge. So that's why I've got kind of a big thing of it. So I've got all these little scraps. Some of it's like writing from a magazine, or that's a paper doily right there. And I just cut up, and that's, you can see that what I'm cutting up right there is the decorative paper that I drew all over. That's the edge of the shape. So I'm cutting a bunch of kind of random shapes, and these little scraps of paper are going to be glued in between the 2 pieces of tissue paper. And after you Mod Podge the whole thing, you'll be able to see the paper in between, the paper that we're cutting up right now. You'll be able to see it underneath the tissue paper because it becomes kind of translucent after you glue it. And so the fun thing about this part is that it's just the randomness of it. I'm not really consciously cutting out any specific shapes. I'm just making them kind of like a certain size so that they'll fit, because you'll be seeing them inside these tree trunks. Yeah, and sometimes I'll cut out like words that I think are fun that kind of go with it. I think some of that pattern paper, the black and white, is from an envelope that I got some junk mail in the mail, and I like the pattern on the inside of the envelope. Okay, and then so I like to add some fibers to it too, because it gives it more texture. So I'm cutting up a bunch of lengths of thread too. So now I'm choosing which colors to use, and so the 2 colors of tissue paper that you use will end up blending together in a way because they're both see-through. So if I get this pink color and then I get this kind of peach color, then it'll end up being this pinky peach color, in other words. And right now I'm putting a bunch of blobs of Mod Podge pretty much all over. Well, actually, so this one I'm only doing, I didn't have a full piece to work with, so I just did part of the tissue paper. So I just put the little scraps on there, and every so often you have to kind of like lift it because it'll get stuck to your work surface. I mean, as you can tell, my work surface is pretty messy. It's covered with paint and scars and everything. It's and that's the type of work surface that you should probably be working on when you do this, just because it's not going to be clean when you're done. It's going to have some glue and it's going to have some paint on it. So I like to layer the pieces as I go, kind of overlapping them. And I'm doing it pretty fast just because I don't want the glue to dry, and also because I'm trying not to think too hard about where I put everything. A lot of these shapes aren't going to end up being seen in the end because I'll have things layered on top of them. So I'm just sort of doing it automatically. I'm kind of doing these stripes, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain, but when I cut the trees out, they're more or less like a straight line. So I can kind of figure out where I'm going to cut when I'm putting all the paper and the thread. Right now I'm putting thread on top, and that's kind of tricky, you can see, because it's trying to stick to my fingers. And I'm looping it around, and it's definitely not straight. I'm not putting it on like a straight line. Okay, so now I'm gonna put the second layer of tissue paper over that. And then just smoothing that out and unsticking it from the table. All right, so this is a lime green color tissue paper. And I'm doing the entire piece this time with gluing this scraps all over it. I guess the way I see these shapes is when you look at a tree and you'll see that the tree has scars on it, like from branches falling off or just the way that it grew, the breaks in the bark. It'll make these kind of shapes, and this is an abstract way of doing that. And I ran out of cut pieces, so I'm just cutting out the pieces as I go, which isn't as efficient because the glue is drying as I go. So I'm probably gonna end up having to put a bunch more glue on. Okay, so now I'm putting the thread on. And I'm cutting it as I go. I think you could probably use a different kind of fiber if you want. I haven't tried too many different things yet, but I think you could use yarn, or you could cut up yarn and just use little bits of fiber, scraps of fabric or something if you wanted for this part. It looks really strange and right now, but it gives the tree trunk a lot of texture. Okay, so one thing about the Mod Podge is that the more you leave your jar open like I am, the more it's gonna dry out. So unless you're doing it at a really fast pace like the way I'm doing it because I'm on video, you might want to close up your jar in between just to make sure that you keep your Mod Podge nice. And the brush too, if you're not using the brush, it will dry on it. So I always have a jar of water that I can dip it into. Okay, so I put the yellow on top of the green, and it'll turn this yellowish green color later. Okay, so here's one. I didn't show the making of this one, but it's this dark blue with the pink over it. And I'm cutting out a tree shape right now, and it's definitely not straight. It's a curved tree, kind of bent. All right, so that's one tree trunk. I think yeah, there's some little jagged edges that I'm just cutting off there. But yeah, and you can see the little shapes in between the two layers. Kind of hard to see the thread, but it's in there. I think at this point I'm sort of scouting out the coolest looking parts of the paper. I like the way that the thread kind of lumped up there at the bottom. And this one is also not a straight tree. It's a little crooked. That's how they look in real life most of the time. I mean, there are trees that are straight up and down, but not my trees. So. And I do tend to spend a lot of time just like playing with the paper and trying out just different parts of the canvas where I like it to be. And also sometimes I like to actually work from life. So I'll take a picture of some trees and then I'll do a little sketch of it and work from that. I've definitely done it both ways. The way that I'm doing it this way is just without any prep, just making them up as I go. Okay, so gluing them down. I put a little glue at the bottom and then I just put the very bottom of the tree on the glue. And then just, and with the Mod Podge, you won't see it, you know, it dries clear. So you can put a lot of Mod Podge down before you put the tree down. And then I keep brushing more Mod Podge onto the tissue paper. And so putting the Mod Podge underneath it and on top of it, that makes the two colors of tissue paper kind of blend together more after it's dry. And the parts where you don't put a lot of glue underneath, it'll be less translucent. It'll be a little bit you'll see the more of the tissue paper and less of the painting underneath, and that's fine too. So if you have the glue on there unevenly, I like that effect too. So I'm overlapping the trees a little bit. Yeah, so I tore the ends off there. So that ends up looking a little rough. If you cut it, it doesn't look as rough. And I think that's it for the gluing the trees on. And the next thing is gluing on all those decorative pieces of paper that we cut out, and that's the next video. So anytime you guys want to put the next video on. I feel like we're kind of watching the glue dry right now, but in reality, it's just the same frame stopped. Okay, so looks like we're gonna get the next video up. Okay, so now you can see what it looks like more or less dry, or at least partway dry. And you can see some of the patterns coming through the tissue paper. So in this part, it's kind of a small painting, and I have a lot of pieces of a lot of pieces cut out. So I'm pretty much going to be covering the entire canvas with Mod Podge at some point. Yeah. I'm trying to get the pieces down so that there aren't too many wrinkles. I think the trees end up being kind of wrinkly, which is nice, but then with this paper, I try to get it on more flat. Okay, so this is part of the randomness that I was talking about. So these little squiggly shapes that I cut out on this piece of paper will show the painting underneath, and I really like the way that turns out. It's kind of unplanned. Like I don't know exactly where the cutout shapes are going to end up and what colors are going to show through. And okay, so I painted a pretty good portion of it with Mod Podge, and now I'm putting these tiny pieces that I cut out, these sort of long eyeball shaped, I guess, round diamonds, I guess you could call them, kind of stripes. So, and I'm doing, and I tend to do these smaller shapes going across in a horizontal way. It gives me the feeling of branches that are going out or leaves or something. One kind of funny tip that I might bring up is that I did a lot of these recently, like over the course of the winter. I did these wearing this really fuzzy sweater, and I ended up getting a lot of these red kind of maroonish fibers stuck on the painting, which is fine, but it wasn't my intention. So it's good to like think about that, because the Mod Podge picks up anything, like if you've got lint, little pieces of thread, or just whatever, it's going to end up in the glue. Okay, so for this part, I'm thinking a lot about color and balancing the colors on the canvas. So, you know, when I put that green piece there on the left, it was, I try to keep it spaced out from the other green parts. And now I'm putting these sage colored little strips. And I tried to put the colors over a color that's a little bit contrasted from it so that it'll stand out more. Once you have it glued down, it's pretty hard to get it back off again. So usually I'll spend maybe a little more time than I am in this video just trying out the way that it looks before I decide. Because if you glue it down and then you change your mind, when you pull it off, it'll rip, and then it'll leave paper on the canvas that's hard to get off. So with this orangish yellow piece, I'm trying to put it in a spot that will set off the orangey yellow colors that are already on there. So that's why I chose to put it down there in the corner, because there's that color that's already there on the left, sort of the middle upper part, and then also on the top right. So I'm trying to balance the colors in a way. And every time I put the paper down over the glue, I also put a layer of glue on top. And that's important. That'll seal it all up. And I think it keeps it longer, because when you hang up the painting, the sunlight gets to it, and this will keep it from fading. So I usually what I do, and in this painting I'm going to be doing it too. I like to leave some area at the bottom free from paper, because we're going to be doing these rubbings, tissue paper on leaves, and I make the leaves into these bushes that I put around the bottom. I didn't leave a lot of room in this one because it's kind of a smaller one. Okay, so now I'm kind of layering it even more. I'm adding these small shapes on top of the bigger shape. That'll give it kind of more texture. Okay, so that video's over. The next thing is the rubbings. So for this part, I searched around for leaves. I tried a bunch of different leaves, but the ones that are really sturdy, I think these are some kind of like a Spanish oak or something. They hold up better when you're doing the rubbings, and you can see the veins in them better. So I'm using oil pastels, just like a little piece, and I've got this kind of a darker purple, and I picked that color partly because I knew it would show up better on camera. And so it's a little tricky. You have to hold the leaf down on one end while you're doing the rubbing, and then just kind of switch around while you do the rest. It takes a little bit of practice. And I pretty much only use the white tissue paper because it's the most translucent. And what I do is I put the leaves pretty close together, kind of, I kind of see them as like forming the shape of a bush. Yeah, and with the oil pastel, you can, after you've rubbed over it, you can put your finger over it and it's not going to smear too much. Not like a chalk pastel, which would smear a lot. So now I'm using the somewhat bigger scissors to cut around the leaf shapes. And for the more detailed stuff, I bring in the little scissors. Okay, so I'm putting the bush on at the bottom, and first doing a layer of Mod Podge and then carefully placing the tissue paper over that. It's pretty easy to wrinkle the tissue paper, and I'm trying to get it to be pretty flat. So you set it down and then you start putting the Mod Podge on with the brush from the center outwards to keep it flat. Okay, so now I'm gonna do some pink leaves. Okay, these are a little bit hard to see, I guess because the color is so pale, but I'm cutting around the leaves. And then, like I said, I put a little Mod Podge down in the middle, and then all over, and then I start gluing from the middle outwards to prevent it from wrinkling. Okay, so one of the things I like to do, and it's definitely optional. I mean, obviously with art, anything goes, but maybe that's not obvious, but that's how I work anyway. I like to add a figure to the painting, and sometimes I'll paint them on, like you probably saw in the slideshow, but more often I will draw a figure and then add it. So what I ended up doing a lot on these paintings is these alien figures. I was really into aliens for a while. So that's what I ended up doing. And that's what I'm doing right now. And it's like I'm just showing a little bit of me drawing it, because it honestly it takes a lot longer than we have. We're kind of running out of time here. But yeah, and then I'm just coloring in the figure, and you can see that I didn't make the lines perfect, but I'm going to cut it out so it doesn't matter.
Violet, if you go over by a couple minutes, it's okay.
Okay.
The next thing is at 5:15 where Jackie has an interview lined up, which will be really fun.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be, it'll be pretty close, but I don't think it's going to go much over.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so now I'm doing this purple color around the edges because it's kind of thicker paper and you can see the edges of the paper. So, all right, and gluing it down real quick, just at the bottom. I decided I wanted one more bush to kind of even it out, balance it, I guess. One thing I like to do sometimes, I didn't have time with this one, but is to, after it's dry, to go over the leaves, the leaf rubbings I've glued on with a little acrylic paint and just paint in between the veins. I think that ends up looking really interesting. And then I usually also go back over the whole painting afterwards and add a bunch of either shapes with paint or with these opaque pens. Okay, so that's it. There it is, done and dried. And a bunch of my friends did the music, so thanks to them. Yeah, and thanks for coming. Yeah, this is quite a long one, so for those of you who stuck it out, good job. And Janet, you said that you found some leaves in the forest, and that's like perfect because that's what this is about, is just like going out in nature and being inspired and then doing some art. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for being here, Violet. Check out my mask. You could collage on these KN95s like nobody's business. Get that done. Thanks so much for everything. It was so great to have that. It's very calming, collaging.
Makes me laugh.
I found it really calming, like watching it makes me kind of want to take a nap a little bit.
Mackenzie was like, "Oh, it's very peaceful."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm gonna collage with my daughter
Cool.
next week when this is all over. Look out, Cora. Here we
Oh
come.
yeah, she's a good artist. I've seen her
She's an
stuff.
amazing artist.
Yeah.
She'll
Mhm.
lead the way for me. She'll help me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between the two of you, I think I'll be okay. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for
And
asking.
have a great day.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, I'm just back for 1 minute as I get our next thing going, so you're not left with nothing for a minute here. Jackie's going to be interviewing Lauren and Mariah Sarabia, who are creating our food experience cooking show that is happening on Sunday at 4, and they're going to talk all about it and get you all inspired to go out, get the ingredients, get ready to make something marvelous.